Yo, what's going on, snipers, and welcome to another Stanley Cup Finals rematch. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you've known that I've done a couple of these. So in the last episode, which was probably a month ago now, I did Anaheim in New Jersey from 2003. We also have a lot of ones up from NHL 18 and NHL 19 if you want to go check those out. There'll be an eye in the top corner, so there's quite a bit of ones from NHL 18, only a couple from NHL 19, but there is still quite a bit of content if you want to take a look at those. But anyways, as I was just saying, in today's episode, we're doing Montreal and LA from 1993, which is the last time a Canadian team won a Stanley Cup, which is pretty crazy to say that because that's literally getting close to 30 years ago. And it was also before I was even alive yet, still by 3 years. So now, how did each team get to the Stanley Cup Finals? Well, let's get into how they did during the regular season. Note that this is back when the NHL had only 24 teams. There were still a few teams that were coming in via expansion in the offseason this year, including Florida and Anaheim. And then there was also 84 games played during the season for each team instead of 82. I think this was one of the only years it was like that in the league, but it was kind of a weird season. So the Habs finished the season going 48, 30, and 6, which placed them 6th best in the NHL. They finished 9th in goals for with 326 and finished 7th in goals against with 280. Their power play clicked at 18.37%, which was good enough for 16th only, so they kind of struggled a bit on the man advantage, but they were good 5-on-5. Their penalty kill was a respectable 81.97%, which was good for 10th in the league. While the Los Angeles Kings were very good offensively this season, but they had still a really kind of an odd record for a playoff team, as they went 39, 35, and 10, which was good for 11th best in the NHL. They had the 5th best offense with 338 goals, mainly due to them having some really good players like Gretzky, Robitaille, Curry, etc. However, this team was really bad at keeping the puck out of their own net, as they allowed 2 more goals against than they scored 4. So they basically allowed 340 goals this season. That would be 21st best in the entire league, so 21st out of 24 teams, only above Hartford, who was not a good team at this point in time, Ottawa, who was in their first full season in the NHL, and then also the San Jose Sharks, who were in their second season, I think, because I believe they came 91-92. Anyway, their power play clicked at 20.12%, which was good for 11th, and their penalty kill was also pretty miserable at 78.45%, which was good for 18th. So the penalty kill could have been the main reason why they let in a lot of goals. Now on the playoff front, the Montreal Canadiens would get by the higher seeded Quebec Nordiques, so basically their rivals in round 1 in 6 games. Then they would manage to sweep the Buffalo Sabres in the second round and then win against the Islanders in the conference finals in 5 games only. So up until the Stanley Cup Finals, they only lost 3 games. As for the Los Angeles Kings, they would take out the Calgary Flames in 6 games, who finished 9 points above them during the regular season, so they took out the higher seeded team. And then in round 2, they would take out the Vancouver Canucks in also 6 games, and the Canucks finished 13 points above them, so they were just knocking off all these higher seeded teams, which was pretty nice for them. And then in the conference finals, they would take out the Toronto Maple Leafs in a hard 7-game series. So it just seems kind of weird, though, that Toronto and LA playing against each other in the conference finals. But back in these days, Toronto was in the West, if I'm not mistaken, in the Central Division. So it was just kind of a weird thing to have LA and Toronto in the conference finals matchup. But anyways, LA would win in 7. And then they would go on to the finals. And yeah, basically, if they would have knocked out the Canadiens in this finals, they would have killed 4 Canadian teams in the playoffs. Now, this Cup Finals only took 5 games for the Canadiens to seal the deal on home ice. However, this was a way tighter series than it actually looked on paper. So the Habs actually lost Game 1 by a score of 4-1, so LA continued their offensive game from the regular season and winning 4-1 in Game 1. But then the Habs would win Game 2, 3, and 4 all in overtime. So those games, if LA would have scored, maybe they could have even won the series, but they literally lost 3 straight overtime games, the Kings. And then it would go into a Game 5 situation, which was back in Montreal, and Montreal would probably use the home ice crowd to their advantage, and they would win the game 4-1 in Game 5 and win the series in 5 games, even though on paper the series was even, dead even. Okay, so now that you guys know a little bit about how each team got to the finals, let's get into the jerseys for both teams, starting off with the Los Angeles Kings, and then we'll get into the roster breakdown. Okay guys, so here is the jerseys for the Los Angeles Kings. As you can see, we got this nice white jersey that a lot of people like, and it's also, I think, a retro jersey that the Kings use currently. Very nice jersey. I actually really want to own one of these. I have a 2000s King on the way, but yeah, I would really like to have one of these or the black version. So yeah, that's the home jersey. As for the away jersey, like I just said, it is the black one. Looks pretty sleek with the gray lettering and gray and white stuff on it as well. Pretty nice jersey. I'm not a huge fan of the logo really, but it's still a nice jersey. And then just because you guys wanted to see probably as well, this is the arena. This is basically my retake on the Great Western Forum where the LA Kings played that season. So yeah, now let's get into the Montreal Canadiens. Okay, so here is the home jersey for the Montreal Canadiens, and it's not really changed much in like at all since like the 90s and all that. But yeah, basically it looks the exact same as nowadays. You got the nice like stripes on the bottom, and you got obviously the same logo that it's been since pretty much the beginning. As for the away jersey, we got this nice red jersey. It actually looks pretty good with the colors that I use, because I don't think I used the actual Habs colors, because I think I used a different shade of blue if I'm not mistaken, but it still looks pretty good. And yeah, that's basically their jerseys. And as for the arena, this is what my retake on the Montreal Forum is. I never saw any of these old arenas, so I don't actually know exactly what they look like. I had to go based off images. So if you actually went to the forum, or if you went to the other forum in LA, let me know. Maybe I didn't create them accurately. I want to create them as accurate as possible, so just let me know. And maybe next time I'll have a more accurate version. So now that you guys have seen the jerseys and the arenas, let's get into the rosters, starting off with the Los Angeles Kings. Okay, so starting off on the first line left wing, we have a legend that all of you should know. That is Lucky Luke Robitaille. Robitaille had the best statistical season of his career this year with 63 goals and 62 assists for 125 points in 84 games. So he scored quite a bit of goals in his career, and this season, 63 goals. Like, nobody scores 60 plus goals anymore. Like, I think the last person to score 50 something, I don't even know if Stamkos hit 60 or not. I remember a few years ago Stamkos scored a lot, but it's really hard for players to score 50 consistently unless you're Ovechkin. So yeah, this was a really good year for Robitaille. He also added 9 goals and 13 assists for 22 points in 24 playoffs games this year, so he was a big contributor to this team going to the Cup Finals. He also had 668 goals in his career, as I was just mentioning, which ranks him 13th all-time. He would win his only Stanley Cup in 2002 with the Detroit Red Wings, which is maybe what I plan to do for next episode. So if you guys want to see 2002 Detroit vs. Carolina, let me know in the comments, because maybe I'll do that for the next episode. Then at center, we have someone you all should know, and if you don't, you're not even a hockey fan probably, because like, who doesn't know who Wayne Gretzky is? But anyways, Gretzky missed the most of this season with a back injury, only playing 45 games. However, he was still able to put up 16 goals and add 49 assists for 65 points, so he was still way over point per game, because he was still that elite player that he was, or franchise player I should say more. However, he was healthy for the entire playoffs, and he would put up 15 goals and 25 assists for 40 points in 24 games to get to the Kings to the final. So this guy was just absolutely insane. Like, I wish I would have gotten to watch him, because like, I only started watching hockey in 2003, but like, I heard so much good things about him, and watching him play is just amazing to see. It's kind of crazy though, this 40 points that he had in the playoffs was his third ever most amount he ever put up in the playoffs. His most he ever had was 47 points in 18 playoff games back in 1985. So that's when the scoring was way up in the league, but at the same time, 47 points in the playoffs is absolutely ridiculous. Then on the right side here, we have Thomas Sandstrom, who is kind of an underrated forward. It could be because he played with Gretzky, I think, a lot when he was in LA, but in 983 career games, he had 394 goals, had 462 assists for 856 points. He was also kind of a feisty player, because he had 1,193 penalty minutes. His only Stanley Cup win would come 4 years after this, in 1997 with the Detroit Red Wings, as they beat the Philadelphia Flyers. Once again, if you guys want to see any episode like that, let me know down below in the comments, because I will do what you guys suggest. During this 1992-93 season, Sandstrom only played 39 games, but still put up 25 goals and 27 assists for 52 points, so he also missed quite a bit. He actually was kind of an injury-prone player and missed a lot of seasons multiple times throughout his career. Like, near the end, I think he got injured quite a bit. In these playoffs, he added 25 points in 24 games. Now on the second line left wing here, we have Tony Granato, who, like a lot of players on this team, had a career year this season. Granato had 37 goals and 45 assists for 82 points in 81 games. However, he was also very physical, adding 171 penalty minutes. In 24 playoff games, he had 17 points in 50 penalty minutes, so he was still taking a lot of penalty minutes in the playoffs, but he was still almost point per game, which is pretty great. Tony never won a Stanley Cup in his career. However, he did win the Masterton back in 1996-97 as a member of the San Jose Sharks, because near the end of his career as well, he was kind of missing a lot of games due to injuries, I think. So, yeah, that is Tony Granato. At center here, we have Pat Conacher, who won one Stanley Cup in 1984 with the Edmonton Oilers in his career, and I believe I did that Stanley Cup Finals rematch, because I remember making him for the Oilers. I could be 100% wrong with that. But anyways, he was not much of a point producer in his career, and he was not really that good offensively at all. He had only 17 points during the regular season in 81 games, even with the team being as offensive as they were. However, in the playoffs, he managed to put up 13 points in 24 games, so he was doing a lot better in this playoffs than he was during the regular season, so he was kind of a big contributor in the playoff run. On the right wing here, we have five-time Stanley Cup champion Jari Kurri, who followed Gretzky to LA from Edmonton. However, he actually didn't play during the 1990-91 season, as he temporarily left the NHL for Italy, where he had 97 points in 40 games in the Italian league. He would then return to the NHL in 91-92, but during this 92-93 season, Kurri had 27 goals and 60 assists for 87 points in 82 games. In the playoffs, he would put up 9 goals and 8 assists for 17 points. On the third line left wing here, we have Warren Reichel, who is the dad of former Jackets prospect Kirby Reichel. Warren was a very physical enforcer, so in that sense, he was not much of an offensive threat. During his career, he had never more than 19 points in a regular season. This 1992-93 season, he had 13 points in 70 games with 314 penalty minutes. However, he had a bit of a surprise this playoff run where he would put up 13 points in 23 games. So he basically put up as much points as he did during the regular season, but in way less games. This was not even really his first ever playoff surprises. In his first ever playoff year with the 1990-91 Chicago Blackhawks, he had 4 points in 3 games, so he kind of stepped up a bit in the playoffs, it seems like, briefly, but in the regular season, he was more of a goon kind of guy. At center here, we have Jimmy Carson, who was a pretty good point producer early in his career, but then pretty much fell off a cliff in terms of production. This season, he came over from the Detroit Red Wings with Mark Potvin, Gary Shushuk, for Paul Coffey, Sylvain Couturier, and Jim Hiller. So he was part of the Paul Coffey deal. Like, he was the main piece going back pretty much. Jimmy played 86 games this season and put up 37 goals, 36 assists for 73 points. This was his second stint in Los Angeles, and this would be his first of 2 back-to-back Stanley Cup Finals appearances. On the third line, the right wing here, we have Mike Donnelly, who had a somewhat short 465-game career that only lasted 10 seasons from 86-87 to 1996-97. Over that span, he had 114 goals and 121 assists for 235 points, so he was decently good at putting up points. This season was his best, putting up 29 goals and 40 assists for 69 points in 84 games. You can kind of get a feel for now why this team was so good offensively. He also had 13 points in 24 playoff games this year. Now on the fourth line left wing here, we have Gary Shushuk, who I previously mentioned came over from Detroit this season alongside Jimmy Carson in the Paul Coffey trade. Shushuk had a short NHL career that only lasted 142 games, where he put up 39 points in 70 penalty minutes. In 17 playoff games this year, he had 4 points, so he was not really much of a point producer. He was kind of physical, more of one of those like role type of players on the bottom six, you could say. At center here, we have this short Corey Millen, who only came in at 5'7", 170 pounds, so he was one of the shorter NHL players that ever played. However, Corey was still a very physical player for his size. Like, he was kind of like a grinder, I guess you could say. He had 236 penalty minutes in 335 career games. He also added 209 points, so he was pretty good offensively too. He and Jarome Iginla were actually dealt from Dallas to Calgary for Joe Noondike, so he was part of the Jarome Iginla deal way back in 1995. During the 92-93 season, Corey had 23 goals and 16 assists for 39 points in 42 games, so he was nearly a point per game. However, he kind of struggled in the playoffs, only putting up 2 goals and 4 assists in 23 games, so only 6 points in 23 games, and he was almost point per game in the regular season, so he kind of dropped off a lot in production. And then to wrap up the dressed forwards for the LA Kings, we have Dave Taylor, who spent his entire 17-year career in Los Angeles. He played 1,111 games, pretty cool, actually 111. And he put up 431 goals and added 638 assists for 1,069 points, so he was almost point per game. He was also a career plus 186 and had 1,589 penalty minutes, so he was pretty much all around a really good player. This was his second last season in the NHL, as he would only play 48 games with 15 points in the regular season. And as for the playoffs, he played in 22 games and had 8 points, so he was kind of decent in the playoffs by comparison to the regular season numbers. Unfortunately for him, he never won a Stanley Cup either, even though he was a huge piece to this LA Kings franchise in the 70s and 80s teams. Now into defensive core, we have the first pairing that consisted of Daryl Sador and Charlie Huddy. Starting off with Daryl Sador, who was a former 7th overall pick of the LA Kings back in 1990. Sador would win 2 Stanley Cups in his career, which one of them was 1999 with the Dallas Stars and one in 2004 with the Tampa Bay Lightning. I actually did Stanley Cup Finals rematches on both those if you want to go check them out. Sador had 11 points in 24 playoff games this year, and he added 29 during the regular season. Now into Charlie Huddy, who won a total of 5 Stanley Cups over his 17-year career. He was an undrafted defenseman who managed to put up 453 points in 1,017 games. He was also a plus 235 and racked up 785 penalty minutes. Huddy won all 5 of his Stanley Cups as a member of the Edmonton Oilers. On the second pairing here, we have Alexei Zhitnik, who had a fantastic rookie season this year, playing 78 games with 12 goals and 36 assists for 48 points as a 20-year-old. He was also a great player in the playoffs with 12 points in 24 games. However, he would never win a Stanley Cup in his career, but he did come close in 1999 with the Sabres, which once again came as a loss to the Dallas Stars. And his defensive partner, we have Hall of Famer Rob Blake, who would wait all the way to the 2001 season with the Avalanche to finally win his first Stanley Cup. During the season, Rob had 16 goals and 43 assists for 59 points in 76 games. In these playoffs, he added 10 points in 23 games. In Blake's career, he put up 240 goals, 537 assists for 777 points. He was also a 4-time NHL All-Star and won 1 Norris back in 97-98. Now into the top 6, we have Tim Waters, who only played 22 games during the regular season with only 2 assists. Tim spent his career between Winnipeg and LA, putting up 177 career points in 741 games. He would also be a career plus 42 and have 1,289 penalty minutes. He would lace up in 22 playoff games this year with 2 assists, just like the regular season. And his defense partner, we have the very physical, tough guy in Marty McSorley, who was also a defenseman and a right winger. So he was kind of like one of those players that play defense that could also play forward, that are like enforcer types. So yeah, he played both forward and defense. In 961 career games, McSorley had 108 goals, 251 assists for 359 points. He also racked up 3,381 penalty minutes, which ranks him 4th all-time behind Ty Domi, Dale Hunter, and Tiger Williams. McSorley won 2 Stanley Cups with the Oilers in 86-87 and 87-88. During this 92-93 playoffs, he had a respectable 10 points in 24 games and also added 60 penalty minutes because, you know, he has to have the penalty minutes as well because very physical player. Now we get into the goaltending tandem. We have Kelly Hrudey, who's currently an analyst for Hockey Night in Canada, and he's been like that since 1998, so he's been doing it quite a long time. Anyways, Kelly was not really, I wouldn't say a great goalie, but he wasn't a bad goalie either, because like during the time when he played, there was a lot of goals getting scored, so it makes sense why his stats were so bad, but at the same time, he won a decent amount of games, so he got wins when they counted. This season, he played 50 games, going 18, 21, and 6 with a 3.86 goals against average and an 887 save percentage. Now, like I was just saying, it could be due to the amount of goal scoring in the league, as he was still ranked 50th amongst goaltenders in wins and stuff like that, I think, or maybe it wasn't in wins, maybe it was goals against, but he's still ranked up there as one of the better goalies this year. Onto his backup, we have Rob Stauber, who pretty much outplayed Hrudey this season. Stauber went 15-8-4 in 31 games, so he won a lot of games for his time that he played. His goals against was still not that great, with a 3.84 goals against average and an 888 save percentage, which was good for 48th amongst all NHL goalies that year. Stauber only played briefly in the NHL, playing from 1989-90 to 1994-95. He was pretty much a fringe NHL goalie, where he played basically 3 to 4 of his last few years in the AHL, in the IHL as well. Now on the depth side, we have Mark Hardy, who played most of these Stanley Cup Finals. However, in this game, there was no way to dress 7 defensemen and 11 forwards without making one of them a D-man play forward, so I basically had to scratch him, unfortunately. Anyways, Hardy was a very physical defenseman, as in these finals he laid out a huge hit that sent Mike Keane flying, and it actually knocked out the glass. It was that hard of a hit. You guys could find that one on YouTube. I found it before as well. I can't show the video, unfortunately, because of copyright issues, but you should go check that one out. Mark came over from the Rangers in a trade this season. This would be his second and final stint in LA, as he would stop playing in the NHL at the end of the 93-94 season, but it would continue for a few more years in the IHL, so he would leave for the IHL like most players. Like, I don't even think it was like an AHL type league. Like, it was basically another NHL league, but it was more of the fringe NHL players played. Next up, we have a fringe NHLer, that being Lonnie Loach, who has a pretty cool hockey name if you ask me. Definitely a hockey name. Anyway, Loach played with 3 teams over a 2-year span. He came over from Ottawa via a waiver claim, and then he was also claimed in the expansion draft by the Anaheim Mighty Ducks in this offseason. Loach would play the rest of his professional career in the IHL, UHL, and briefly overseas in Switzerland and Slovenia. Next up, we have Mark Potvin, who was the cousin of former Islanders great Denny Potvin. Mark had a short 121-game career as an NHL enforcer, putting up 8 points in 456 penalty minutes in those 121 games. Mark played in Detroit, Hartford, and Boston. Unfortunately, he took his own life at the age of 38 in 2006, so rest in peace, Mark. And now to end the Los Angeles Kings, we have another enforcer, that being Jim Thompson, who came over from the Ottawa Senators this season. Jim, like Mark Potvin, was very similar in terms of their career statistics, as Thompson played 115 career games with only 7 points in 416 penalty minutes. Thompson also played in Washington, Hartford, New Jersey, Ottawa, and Anaheim. Okay, so now that you guys have seen the LA Kings, let's get into the roster for the Cup champion Montreal Canadiens. Okay, so on the first line, left wing here, we have Kirk Muller, who was a former second overall pick back in 1984 behind Mario Lemieux. Muller played 1,347 career games with New Jersey, Montreal, the Islanders, Toronto, Florida, and Dallas. In those 1,347 games, he put up 357 goals and added 602 assists for 959 points. He was also a career minus 147 and had 1,228 penalty minutes. He was also a head coach in the NHL actually briefly from 2011-12 to 2013-14 with the Carolina Hurricanes, and he's now been an associate coach of the Montreal Canadiens since 2016-17. At center here we have Vincent Damphousse, who was in his first season in Montreal, as he previously spent a year in Edmonton, and before that he was with Toronto. Vincent played 1,378 career games, scoring 432 goals and adding 773 assists for 1,205 points. He was also a career +7 and had 1,188 penalty minutes. This season was his best statistical season with 97 points in 84 games. He also added 23 points in 20 playoff games en route to Montreal's Stanley Cup win. At right wing here we have Brian Bellows, who was also in our 1991 and 1998 Stanley Cup Finals rematches back in NHL 18. Those are also up on the channel if you want to guys take a look at those. Anyways, Brian is Islanders prospect Kiefer Bellows' dad. You guys probably know that by now. Brian was a pretty underrated forward in my opinion, as he only made 1 NHL All-Star game, despite putting up 485 career goals and 537 assists for 1,022 points in 1,188 games. Now his draw could have been his plus-minus, which was a career minus 120. Brian had 40 goals and 88 points this season in his first of 3 with the Montreal Canadiens. Now on the second line left wing here we have the brother of Marcel Dion, that is Gilbert Dion, who was 19 years younger, so a pretty big age gap between the two of them. Marcel was long retired at this point in time. Anyways, Gilbert had a brief career unlike his brother that only lasted 223 games. However, during that time period he was able to put up 140 points in 108 penalty minutes. During the regular season he had 48 points in 75 games this year, as well as 12 points in 20 playoff games. He also played in Philadelphia and Florida, and then after that he pretty much left for overseas for the rest of his career, but he actually played pretty decently as well. At center here we have another player that had a brief NHL career, that being Paul DiPietro, who is no way related to Rick DiPietro, just another guy with the same last name. Anyway, Paul played 392 career games between Montreal, Toronto, and Los Angeles. Over that span, he had 80 points in 96 penalty minutes. This season was technically his best statistically, as he had 17 points in 29 regular season games, as well as 13 points in 17 playoff games. After he left the NHL at 26 years of age, he would go overseas to Germany and Switzerland and Italy, and then he actually spent so much time in Switzerland that he was actually able to represent them at the 2000 Olympic Games in Truro, Italy. So basically like the same type of idea of like Hinat Dominichelli, a guy that was born in Canada but then played so much in Switzerland that he got like I guess a dual citizenship so he could represent Switzerland at the Olympics. Now on the right wing here we have Mike Keane, who also made some other appearances in past Stanley Cup Finals rematches. You guys would probably recognize him from a couple of those. He was in the 1999 Finals with the Dallas Stars and the 96 Finals with the Colorado Avalanche. Mike won 3 Stanley Cups and was pretty good role player. Like, I mean, he was really underrated. He played 1,161 games, had 470 points, and was a career plus 70, and also added 881 penalty minutes. So he could pretty much play defense, he could fight, and then he could also play offensively decently. Playoff wise, he could also step up in the clutch as he had 74 playoff points in 220 games. Not to mention he was also at plus 24 in his playoffs and had 135 penalty minutes. So he pretty much just did everything in the playoffs as well, and that helped a lot of teams win Stanley Cups. It's good to have those type of role players and depth guys that can come up and step up when need to. Like, I think he had a couple game-winning goals in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken, as well. Now on the third line left wing here, we have Benoit Brunet, who spent the majority of his career with the Montreal Canadiens, except for like the last 2 parts of his final season, which was 2001-02, where he spent time in Dallas and in Ottawa. In 539 career games, he had 262 points, was a plus 45, and had 229 penalty minutes. He also had 10 points during his playoff run. At center, we have Guy Carbonneau, who won 3 Stanley Cups in his career, including 2 with Montreal in 86 and in 1993, and then 1 in 1999 with the Dallas Stars. He was the captain of the Habs this season. Over his career, he played 1,318 games with 260 goals, 403 assists for 663 points. He was also career plus 186 and had 820 penalty minutes, so he was pretty much like a two-way forward. Like, he had a decent amount of points, but he was more of a guy that played good defensive hockey, I find. At least that's based on the statistics I see. Carbonneau also played 231 career playoff games with 38 goals and 55 assists for 93 points. Now on the right wing here we have John LeClair, who is only in his 3rd season in the NHL at this point in time. In 72 games this year, LeClair put up 44 points. He'd be dealt to the Flyers in 1994-95, where he spent the most of his career. His only other chance in the Stanley Cup came in 1996-97 when the Flyers lost to the Detroit Red Wings, so he only got 1 cup in his career, but he came close to getting another. In his career, he had 406 goals, 413 assists for 819 points in his 964 games. He was also a plus 264 and had 501 penalty minutes, so he was a pretty good player, and he was also a really big player. He was 6'3", 226, so he was a very big power forward kind of a guy. He was also one of only 2 NHL players from Vermont, the other one being Graham Mink, if I'm not mistaken. Now on the 4th line, we have Ed Ronan, who played 182 career games between Montreal, Winnipeg, and Buffalo. Over that span, he only put up 13 goals and 23 assists for 36 points, and he also added 101 penalty minutes, so he's more of a physical player and kind of like a role player as well, just kind of like Keane, but way worse. In that center here, we have Hall of Famer Denis Savard, who spent most of his NHL career in Chicago, but also played briefly here in Montreal and in Tampa Bay. Denny was all around a really good player, as in 1,196 career games, he had 473 goals, 865 assists for 1,338 points. He was also career plus 103 and had 1,336 penalty minutes. This season was his last in Montreal, as he would put up 50 points in 63 regular season games and 5 assists in 14 playoff games. And then on the right wing we have Stéphane Lebeau, who was another brief NHL player that only played 373 career games. This season he had 80 points in 71 games, but then he would be dealt to Anaheim the following year, where he would only put up 26 points in 56 games. So he pretty much dropped off a lot in production, like a lot of these guys that had brief careers. He would then leave for Switzerland, just like Paul DiPietro at the age of 27, where he would play till 2001. His brother Patrick also played 2 games with the Habs back in 1990-91. Now into the defensive core we have Matthew Schneider, who played with a handful of teams from 1987-88 to 2009-10. He played in Montreal, the Islanders, Toronto, the Rangers, the Kings, Detroit, Anaheim, Vancouver, and Phoenix. In 1,289 career games, he had had 223 goals, 520 assists for 743 points. He was also career plus 66 and had 1,245 penalty minutes. This playoff run, he only played 11 of the 20 games. Next, we have Eric Desjardins, who was another underrated defenseman in my opinion. Desjardins played 1,143 career games between Montreal and Philadelphia. Over that span, he had 136 goals, 439 assists for 575 points. He was also career plus 198 and had 757 penalty minutes. This year, he had 45 points in 82 regular season games, and he also had 14 points in 20 playoff games. Now into the top 4 pairing, we have Lyle Oline, who was a very physical defender. In 1,056 career games, Lyle had a respectable 252 points, but most of which were assists, so he was more of a defensive defenseman in that sense. He was also a career plus 29 and had 2,316 penalty minutes, which is 30th all time amongst all NHL players, and 8th amongst defensemen. These playoffs, he had 6 points and was a plus 9, and also added 30 penalty minutes in 20 games. And as defense partner, we have Patrice Brisebois, who spent 16 of his 18 years in the NHL with Montreal, the other 2 being in Colorado. Brisebois played 70 games this season with 10 goals, 21 assists for 31 points. However, he kind of struggled in the playoffs where he would only put up 4 assists in 20 games. This was his 3rd year in the NHL and his first full season actually, because he only played like a couple games in 1990-91 and 91-92. Now in the top 6 here, we have JJ Deneau, who played with 10 different teams over his NHL career, which is tied for 2nd behind Mike Sillinger, who a lot of you guys know was on pretty much every single alumni team in this game. Like, he played with 12 different teams. But anyways, this is about JJ Deneau, not Mike Sillinger. So Deneau played 899 career games with 250 points and 685 penalty minutes. Over his career, he played with Vancouver, Philadelphia, Montreal, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Anaheim, the New York Islanders, Nashville, Phoenix, and Minnesota. Crazy thing is that Deneau played with 7 of those teams in a 6-year span, so he was getting dealt multiple times for 4 straight seasons. There's like seasons where he was dealt 3 times in a year, and then the season afterwards he was with 2 teams, the season afterwards he was with 2 teams. Like, it's pretty ridiculous that that guy had to move around that much. Like, I can't even imagine how his family felt like moving around that much. And then to round out the top 6, we have Kevin Haller, who was more of a physical defensive defenseman. He actually came over from the Buffalo Sabres the year prior to this for Peter Svoboda. In 642 career games, Haller had 138 points, was a plus 22, and had 907 penalty minutes. This was technically his typical season with 11 goals, 14 assists for 25 points in 73 games. He also had 7 points in 17 playoff games. Now in goal, you guys should all know him as well, unless you live under a rock and you don't know goalies at all. But anyways, we have one of the best goalies of all time, top 3. I'm not going to give my opinions on who the best goalies are, but anyways, Patrick Waugh, definitely a top 3 goalie of all time. Based on his other seasons, like before this, Waugh had a semi-rough year this year, but it could have been also because I think this was the only NHL season with 84 games. Correct me if I'm wrong, but anyways, he kind of struggled. He went 31, 25, and 5 in 62 games, so not too bad of a record, kind of around 500. But then he had an 894 save percentage and a 3.2 goals against average with 2 shutouts, that being his 2nd worst NHL season. His other worst season was his first full year in the NHL, where he was like, I think he had like an 867 save percentage or something like that, or maybe it was a bit above that. But anyways, he dominated in the playoffs this year, going 16-4 with a 2.13 goals against average and a 929 save percentage with no shutouts. In his career, he won 2 cups with the Habs and 2 cups with the Avs. Anyways, now onto the backup, we have Andre Rasico, who was a kind of an interesting goalie. He had a pretty good record this year, but his save percentage and goals against were not the greatest again, but then again, it could be because of the league at this point in time. He had a 3.39 goals against average and an 881 save percentage with 1 shutout. His NHL career only lasted another season, as he just could not keep the puck out of the net, and he was given the nickname of Red Light Rasico because I think he let in like 4.44 goals or something like that in his last season. And yeah, his career goals against is like a 3.5. So yeah, he was not really the greatest goalie. Like, he won a lot of games this year, but he just did not keep the puck out of the net. Now into the depth forwards and depth defensemen, we have Rob Ramage, who currently acts actually as the Canadiens Director of Player Development. So kind of interesting that he's still with the Canadiens organization. Rob was in his 2nd last NHL season, and he was a former 1st overall pick actually of the Colorado Rockies back in 1979. And no, I'm not talking about the baseball team, because there was a Rockies in the NHL as well, in case you guys didn't know about that. But being a player with the Rockies saw him take a huge hit in his career plus minus. In 1,044 career games, he had 139 goals, 425 assists for 564 points. However, he was a career minus 178 and had 2,226 penalty minutes. In his 234 games with the Rockies, he was a minus 136. So his early years with the Rockies were horrendous in terms of defense. Like, I think he was like a minus 47 multiple seasons in a row. But anyways, it improved when he went to other teams a bit. He also won actually another Stanley Cup, and that was in 1989 with the Calgary Flames over the Montreal Canadiens. So he's won 2 Stanley Cups in his career. Next up, we have another depth defender, that being Donald Dufresne, who played 268 games in his career over a 9-year span, so he was mostly a career depth defender. He played in Tampa Bay, LA, St. Louis, and Edmonton as well. In his 268 games, he had 42 points, was a +1, and had 258 penalty minutes. So he was more of a defensive defenseman who was also quite physical and aggressive. Next up, we have Sean Hill, who was in his first and only season with the Montreal Canadiens, unless you include 1990-91 and 91-92. Where he played his first few games in the NHL in the playoffs. Like, it's kind of weird because his first 2 years just complete playoffs. So he played like 4 games, I think, combined or something like that. And then he finally made his season debut in 92-93. He would then be claimed in the offseason in the expansion draft by the Mighty Ducks. In 876 career games, he had 298 points, was a minus 46, and had 1,008 penalty minutes. He also played in Ottawa, Carolina, St. Louis, Florida, the Islanders, and Minnesota. The closest he came to another Stanley Cup ring was in 2002 when the Canes lost to the Detroit Red Wings. Next up, we have depth forward Jesse Belanger, who was also claimed in the 1993 expansion draft, but by the Florida Panthers. Jesse actually had a pretty good impact in his first year in Florida with 50 points in 70 games, but then his career kind of dwindled from there. As his time in Montreal, though, it was really brief as he only played 23 games over a 2-year span with 6 points. However, in this playoffs, he played 9 games and had just 1 assist, so he actually got to play some time in this playoffs. Jesse also did not take a lot of penalties as he only had 56 penalty minutes in 246 games, and I don't think he took more than 20 penalty minutes in the season, so he was one of those guys that just did not go into the box that much. Next up, we have a physical player, and that being Mario Roberge, who played 50 of his 112 career games this season, so he didn't really play much at all in the NHL after this and before this. He also had 8 of his career 14 points this season, so he had more than half of his points this season as well. In 112 games, Mario had 314 penalty minutes, so he was very physical. Also, he didn't actually make the NHL till he was 27 years old, as he was mostly playing in the AHL for the Fredericton Canadiens the years before this and after this. His brother Serge also had a brief NHL career that only lasted 9 games with the Quebec Nordiques in 1990-91. Next up, we have another depth forward, that being Gary Lehman, who came over from the Calgary Flames this season in exchange for Brian Skrudland. Lehman actually had a pretty good impact when he came over to the Canadiens from the Flames, as he would put up 18 points in 20 regular season games at the club. However, in the playoffs, he would only play in 11 of the 20 games and only put up 1 goal and 2 assists, so he kind of struggled a bit in the playoffs, but he was really good for them down the stretch. Lehman also played in Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, and St. Louis. In 667 career games, Lehman had 466 points and 531 penalty minutes. Next up, we have enforcer Todd Ewan, rest in peace again as well to another player. Todd played 516 career games with 76 points, but also racked up 1,914 penalty minutes. In 26 career playoff games, he had no points and had 87 penalty minutes. Todd would be dealt in the offseason to the league's new team in Anaheim. And finally, to wrap up the rosters for both teams, we have Oleg Petrov, who was in his first season in the NHL. Oleg played 9 games this season with 3 points and only played in 1 playoff game. In his 8 years in the NHL, he played 382 games, 365 of which were with the Canadiens and only 17 with the Predators. After his NHL career ended in 2002-03, he would play in Switzerland and back in his home country of Russia till 2012-13. Okay, so now that you guys have seen the rosters for both of these teams, let's get into the playoff simulation and see who ends up winning the cup. Are we going to have the same outcome as what happened in real life, or are the LA Kings going to use that offense they had during the regular season to win the Stanley Cup? We'll find out. Montreal has home ice in this series because they finished higher in the standings, but who will win this Stanley Cup Finals rematch? Let me know what you guys think down below. Give your feedback and all that sort of stuff. Let's get into Montreal in the Montreal Forum. See if the LA Kings could win Game 1 like they did in real life. First period of Game 1. And it is 3-1 Habs, so great start from the Montreal offense. Matthew Schneider scores a shorthanded goal early on Kelly Rudy. Yari Curry scores to make it a tie game, but then Danfou scores 2 goals, and the Habs have a 3-1 lead after 1. Shots are 11-6 also in favor of the Habs, so this is looking kind of like the reverse of Game 1. because like I said, LA actually won this game 4-1, so it's now looking like Montreal could win this game potentially 4-1 or something like that. So let's see what happens here in a second, and okay, it's 4-2 now. Gilbert Dion makes it 4-1, but yeah, it's Mike Donnelly, right? Yeah, I think so. I don't know why I'm getting mixed up with him, but anyways, Donnelly scores to make it a 4-2 game. Shots are actually now in LA's favor, 23-21, but it seems like Montreal's offense is like doing really well, and LA's offense is kind of drying up a bit, but maybe not. Tony Granato makes it a 4-3 game, and Tony Granato scores again. Okay, never mind. Montreal's botching this third period a bit. Surprise Patrick Wall's led 4 goals in game 1. But then again, it's realistic that he has. So Tony Granato with 2 goals in a power play late in the game. And there's a late goal from Gary Shushok. What the hell? Okay, that's a really weird simulation. But LA takes game 1 like they did in real life, but by a different score. So Gary Shushok with the game winner. Like I said, that guy only had 4 points during this playoffs. And yeah, somehow he comes home with the game winner. So there's all the scores. If you guys want to take a look at the box scores, I'm not going to read it all out, but LA scoring 4 unanswered goals to win that game. Mainly due to Tony Granato's third period heroics. 3 stars in that game. Granato gets first star with 3 points, Danfus the second star with 2 goals, and Matthew Schneider the third star with 1 goal and 6 hits. Okay. Interesting game 1. I wonder if LA is going to continue to score a lot of goals like they just did in game 1, because that's the offensive capability of the LA Kings. They could score a lot of goals, or all of a sudden, like, I think in this playoffs they kind of dried up a bit after game 1. Like, basically, like I said, they went to overtime multiple times. LA just could not score as much as they normally did, and maybe that was the main concern why they lost. So let's get into game number 2. Still Montreal in the Montreal form. Let's see if Montreal can tie the series up here. First period, and it's 1-0 LA. Corey Millen scores. Shots are 10-8 in favor of the Kings. Let's see if the Canadiens can get one back here in a second, and they're going to get 2. Okay. Guy Carbonneau, the captain, scores to tie the game up, and then a goal a couple minutes later from Kirk Muller. Okay, this is a closer game, just like in real life. Like I said, the Canadiens won 3 straight overtime games to take a 3-1 series lead, and then they won in Game 5 by a pretty big score. Shots are 23-20 in favor of the Kings, but it's a 2-1 score for the Habs. Let's see what happens here in the third period. Will the Habs just lock this one down? Penalty kill. Nicely done. Not even that I care who wins. And a shorthanded goal from Mike Keane. That's pretty realistic of Mike Keane. Like I said, he's one of these role players that could pretty much do it all. And Patrick Wall looks like he's going to have a good rebound game after letting in 5 goals. And the Habs are going to tie the series up with a 3-1 victory. Let's take a look at the scores. So Millen from Taylor and Shitnick. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to read it all out, but there's some player stats. 3 stars in that game. Patrick Wall, the first star with 30 saves and a .967 save percentage. Mike Keane with that big shorthanded goal to make it a 3-1 game in the third. And Guy Carbonneau with the other goal. Okay, so far we're actually having a pretty realistic simulation of how each team won games. Montreal wins the next 3 games as well, then it's realistic. But yeah, we'll see if this actually sims out exactly the same. That would be kind of cool. I doubt it will, but who knows. Here we go, back in LA at the Great Western Forum. Let's see if Montreal could take a 2-1 series lead here. First period, and it's 2-0 for Montreal. Denny Savard scores and Kirk Muller scores. So that's first line and the fourth line. So Montreal's getting good offense from all 4 of their lines, it seems like, I think, at the moment. Shots are 10-5 in favor of the Canadiens. Let's see what happens here in a second, and it's 2-1. So Tony Granato picking up where he left off in Game 1 with another goal, making it a 2-1 game. So it's pretty much anybody's game going here in the third unless Montreal scores early. Let's see what happens. Power play for the Habs. They don't score on it. LA needs to get some offense, and they get one from Tim Waters. Of everybody on the team, it seems weird, but with like Tim Waters has more goals than Gretzky in this series right now. But it's a 2-2 game. Are we going to go to overtime like we did in actual Game 3? Yes, we are. Okay, so this is actually assimilating pretty close to accurate so far, I think. So it's a 2-2 game here in LA. Will Montreal win in overtime like they did in real life? And if so, who's going to score it? I don't remember who scored in real life, but who's going to score it here tonight in this simulation? And it's going to be an LA Kings player, and it's going to be Gretzky. Okay, so that's a bit different in the realistic Stanley Cup Finals, but we're here for maybe different outcomes. So the Habs blew a 2-0 lead and lose in overtime as Gretzky finally gets a goal. Okay. So that could have actually happened, though, in real life, though, because Gretzky, like I was saying, though, if LA could have won these overtime games, they could have won the Stanley Cup. But unfortunately, they just could not get those clutch goals when they needed to. So maybe this time around, they will get those clutch goals. Okay, so we have to head to game number 4, still in LA, as the Kings have a 2-1 series lead. Will they take a 3-1 series lead, or will the Habs tie it up, headed back to Montreal? First period, and it's 1-1. Lyle Odelheim scores. Like, it's guys that shouldn't be scoring that are scoring, which is really weird. But anyways, Lyle Odelheim scores to make it 1-0, and then Rob Blake ties it up. The shots are heavily in Montreal's favor, 15-5, yet somehow it's still a tie game. Second period, still 1-1. Shots are 24-16 now in favor of Montreal, so Montreal still killing it in shots, but somehow Kelly Rudy's playing really well. Let's see what happens here in the third. And Jimmy Carson is going to score to make it a 2-1 game. And LA has a 2-1 lead for the... yeah, I don't know if they're going to take a 3-1 series lead, are they? Or are the Habs going to tie it up here late? Power play? No dice. And LA is going to take a 3-1 series lead. So this is actually turning out to be kind of like a reverse of the actual Stanley Cup Finals, because like I was saying, like pretty much all these games were close. Like game 3 and 4 were really close, and game 2. So it's almost like reverse though. The LA is winning these games instead of Montreal. So let's take a look at those goals. So LA is 1 win away from the Stanley Cup, which is kind of weird. I wonder if Montreal could find a way to come back. So, yeah, the game-winning goal coming from Jimmy Carson in that third period. 3 stars, Kelly Rudy with another really good game, and then Rob Blake and Jimmy Carson. So, I know a lot of Habs fans are going to be mad if LA wins, but it's kind of realistic to an extent, because like I was saying, this series was actually a lot tighter than it looked. Game 1 was written off easily to LA. Game 5 was easily written off to Montreal, but Game 2, 3, and 4 were pretty much anybody's game. So here we go. Will the LA Kings win their first Stanley Cup in franchise history a lot earlier than they did in real life, or will Montreal somehow survive another day? Let's go real-time simulation just because it's a potential elimination game. If the Kings have a chance to win the Stanley Cup, we'll intervene and let you guys watch the last 5 minutes of the game. And Brian Bellows opens the scoring on the power play, so there's some offense that the Habs need. Matthew Schneider gets a power play goal as well. Good start for the Habs here in Game 5. And it's going to be 2-0 for Montreal after 1. Shots are 17-9 in favor of them as well. Let's see what happens here in the second. Will the Habs be able to rally from a 3-1 deficit? There's potential there, actually, for that to happen. Because if Patrick Wall just plays good, they could easily do so. And also if their offense steps up. Because some guys have been pretty quiet. Ed Ronan makes it 3-0, so this looks like an LA loss probably, unless Dave Taylor. Okay, maybe not. I might be counting my chickens. Dave Taylor and Mike Donnelly make it a 3-2 game going into the third. So Montreal might be blowing a 3-0 lead in this game unless they can get some insurance here in the third. Shots are 28-22 in favor of them. Let's see what happens in this third period. Will Montreal survive another day? Kevin Haller makes it 4-2. That might be it. Mike Donnelly, though, gets one right back to make it 4-3. Power play for the Habs. They make it 5-3. Another power play goal. That's the third power play goal tonight. Dan Foose scores. And yeah, we're going to be going to a game 6, it looks like. 3 power play goals tonight from the Habs. Oh, late goal from Gary Shushuk. And it's going to be a 5-4 final. This has actually been a pretty tight series, too, because a lot of these games have been 1-goal games. Like the last 3 games, I think, have all been 1-goal games. So the Habs are going to survive another day and force a Game 6. And that's back in LA as well in the Great Western Forum. So let's see, will the LA Kings be able to win the Stanley Cup on home ice, or will the Montreal Canadiens force a Game 7? Because, like, honestly, this series could have went 7 games in real life, but it just didn't. We'll do another real-time simulation for this one. Kevin Haller opens the scoring early for Montreal. I don't know how Kevin Haller is scoring so much. Like I said, this guy was a defensive defenseman mostly. And Wayne Gretzky ties it up at 1. Of course, Wayne Gretzky's going to get a goal. Not a lot of shots in this first period either. And it's going to be 1-1 after 1. The shots are 7-6 in favor of the Kings. Let's see what happens in a big second period. Montreal needs to get their offense going on that top 6 again. Penalty kill for them, and they managed to kill it off. And now they get a power play, but they don't score on it this time. Last game they had 3 power play goals. This time they don't get anything. And Gary Shusha makes it 2-1 for the Kings. Wow, okay, so the Kings might be winning the Stanley Cup if they could hold off for another period. So it's 2-1 for the LA Kings going into the third. Will they win the Stanley Cup and hold off the Canadiens? Let's see what happens here in the third. We'll go down to 4-time simulation once it gets closer to the end. And like I said, I'll intervene and let you guys watch the celebration. And Luc Robitaille makes it 3-1. That's probably the icing on the cake there. Unless the Habs could get some late goals here, but it doesn't look like they're going to. We're going to intervene right about... Let's go right about now. So it's 3-1 for LA. Looks like they're going to take the Stanley Cup, which is kind of realistic, but like at the same time, that goaltending situation, they shouldn't technically be. But I'll let you guys watch the celebration, and I'll see you guys back up at the end of it with like a little stats recap. And yeah, see you guys in a bit.
And a solid job tying up his opponent. Muller's got the puck. Moves it quickly over to Muller. Knocked away. Los Angeles is across the blue line. To his teammate. Moves the puck inside the offensive zone. Lets it fly. Oh, how do you miss it?
Well, you miss it because you're trying to be perfect with it. Really good opportunity that he doesn't cash in.
Approaching the final minute of regulation. In need of a goal, the extra attacker's out on the ice. 53 seconds. Fires towards the empty net. Fires into the empty net. Montreal's got the puck along the boards. Here's a short pass to Bellows. Here's the pass. And makes the save. There it is, Ray, the most beautiful trophy in all of sports, Lord Stanley.
It is a beautiful trophy. You feel a magnetism when you get near it. And to the players that win it, oh my gosh, I'm so jealous.
Here in the later stages of this period, the Kings are up 3-1. Play resumes here as he wins the draw inside the offensive zone. In front of the net, the goaltender covers up for a whistle on the play.
Schultz has had an outstanding playoffs, among the league leaders in goals through this playoff rounds.
Los Angeles continues to lead here late in this third period. While the setters are jammed up, nice job by the winger to steal the puck. Towards the gaping net, and breathe!
I got 2 of these in my career. I was never out at the end of a game.
You had 400 goals and only scored 2 empty netters?
Yeah, when we were protecting the lead, it was safest with me sitting down.
What an indictment.
Oh, yeah. Oh, now you got a couple of goal lead here with the empty netter. That should be enough to put this away.
Los Angeles has been all over them right from puck drop, and they lead it big time late in this third period. Center's jammed up, and the winger grabs the puck. And forces a huge turnover here with the steal. Moves the puck into the attacking area. Puts it on net. Comes up with the stop.
Confidence just oozing from him as he's one of the top players in the league in points here in these playoffs.
Los Angeles came ready to play tonight. Tons of scoring chances, and they lead it big time here late in this third. Off the draw, and he ties up his opponent. Picks up the puck in his own end. Sanitz has the puck against the half wall. Just seconds away now as they are set to hoist the Stanley Cup. Lets it fly. Los Angeles up big time late in this third period. They have been the better team tonight. And there's the final horn. What every single one of these players played for. Stanley Cup champions ring.
When they get a close look at this trophy, they'll see all those names engraved on it. And then one day, their name is going to be on it very soon.
You know, in a moment like this, Ray, you've been around this game for decades. Who comes to mind when you look at all the guys jumping out on the ice celebrating right now? Who do you think of in these moments?
Well, for me, it was Bobby Orr and his famous picture flying through the air against the St. Louis Blues. That's the one that always comes to mind, the most iconic photo, I believe, in the Stanley Cup Finals in the history of the game.
You've been on both sides of the equation for this. Do you like this tradition?
I do, James. I think it's really important to show some respect to the team that has just won. It's been a hard-fought series, and you just go through, you say, good series, and move on.
What an impressive run, and I think well-deserved to be named playoff MVP.
I've always noticed that the player that gets named Conn Smythe Trophy winner is always a little uneasy because it's such a team win, the Stanley Cup, of course, that the Conn Smythe feels a little awkward in this spot.
It's also huge.
It's a giant trophy.
And here he comes, the skate of a lifetime, coming to collect the Stanley Cup.
I can't even imagine the emotion that's coursing through him right now. All this work, all those years, and it's going to be culminated by holding the Stanley Cup over your head.
Oh, I love this. This is just awesome to watch play out here as they pass the trophy around.
This actually started as an accident, that the trophy was held up for the first time by Ted Lindsay. And then now it's a regular thing. Just think, if that accident hadn't happened, we wouldn't have this great celebration that we see now.
And as they gather for the team photo, there are your Stanley Cup champions.
This is the emotional picture, the one with the cup for the first time. The polished one will be in a couple of days when everybody's shaved their beards and combed their hair.
So there you guys have it. The LA Kings won the Stanley Cup, and Gretzky won the Conn Smythe, but for some reason the game defaulted his jersey number from 99 to 97, even though I don't think I had retired numbers turned on, so that kind of bummed me out a bit because I like seeing him with his actual number, not 97, but whatever. Gretzky ends up winning the Conn Smythe because of that game, had 3 points in that game. Sandstrom also has 2 points, and Robitaille, the third star, at 2 points. So LA winning the Stanley Cup. Like I said, it's somewhat realistic because it was actually a closer series, but at the same time, it would have been nicer to see an actual realistic simulation, but it's cool to see different outcomes as well. So let's take a look at player stats just for the playoffs, and then that'll be it for this episode. And then next episode, I think could be 2002. I want to do 2002. We'll see. So anyways, point-wise, Muller had the most points amongst everybody. 7 points in 6 games. Gretzky was point per game. Sandstrom also was point per game. Jimmy Carson was up there with 5 points. It was nice actually to see him get handed the Stanley Cup because he was a LA Kings during like the later 80s. So he was kind of like one of those players you think of when you think of the earlier LA Kings players, I guess. But it would have been nice to see Dave Taylor with it as well. Dan Foose and then Granado. A lot of players put up decent amount of points. Who had like a really bad playoffs? That shouldn't have. And nobody really underperformed. It looks like John LeClaire had 2 assists. That's not the greatest. In terms of goaltending, Patrick Waugh was not that good. And yeah, Kelly Rudy was not that good either. So kind of realistic for the time period, actually. But yeah, definitely Gretzky deserved to get the Conn Smythe if LA won the Stanley Cup in real life as well, because he had 40 points that year, like I said. But yeah, anyways, guys, that's going to do it for the Stanley Cup Finals rematch. Let me know what you guys want to see for like the next episodes and stuff like that. Like I feel like 2002 or 2001 would be fun to do, but give me a one from anywhere in history, like even like one from the 70s or 80s, and I might do it. So let me know down below, and I'll see you guys next time.